correct. The truth is, not all overthinking is bad. Understanding the difference can unlock your potential. The difference?
Have you ever replayed a conversation that ended hours ago, editing your own lines like it's still happening? Have you ever mapped out a scenario that will probably never happen, down to the exact words you'd say if it did? Have you ever lain awake at 2 in the morning, not because anything is actually wrong, but because your brain simply refuses to stop asking what if? Have you ever finished thinking about something, only to notice 10 minutes later that you're already back inside it without remembering when you returned? Most people call this overthinking and treat it like one single problem to fix, as if the goal was simply to think less. But the truth is more complicated and more interesting than that. Some of the most thoughtful, emotionally attuned people you'll ever meet are also some of the most exhausted, not from doing too much, but from thinking too much. And the strange part is, the same mental habit that makes them so perceptive is the very thing quietly draining them. Today, we're going to break down the real psychology of overthinking, why it isn't one single pattern, what's actually happening in the brain when it happens, and how to tell the difference between the kind that helps you and the kind that's slowly wearing you down. Welcome to Psychology Sounds. Tell us in the comment section how this resonates with you. Like the video and subscribe to support us. To understand overthinking, you first have to understand that the brain isn't malfunctioning when it happens. It's doing exactly what it was trained to do. Psychologists describe this pattern as rumination, the mind circling back to the same thought loops again and again, especially around uncertainty or unresolved social situations. This usually isn't a sign of weakness. Often, it's a sign of a mind that's exceptionally good at pattern recognition, constantly scanning, constantly processing, constantly searching for meaning. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning and self-reflection, tends to stay unusually active even during moments meant for rest, the kind of quiet stretch where most minds would naturally idle down. Meanwhile, the brain's background processing system keeps generating internal monologue, drafting responses to conversations that haven't even happened yet. The result is a mind that never fully powers down. And for many people, this pattern didn't start in adulthood. It often began earlier in environments where outcomes felt unpredictable, where moods shifted without warning, where mistakes carried consequences that felt disproportionate. In that kind of environment, a young mind learns a very logical strategy. Think ahead, anticipate everything, and maybe you can protect yourself before anything goes wrong. It's less a decision than a quiet negotiation the nervous system makes on its own, long before anyone would call it a strategy at all. Overthinking, seen this way, isn't a flaw. It's an adaptation, a smart nervous system doing precisely what it was trained to do. The habit of scanning for what could go wrong wasn't irrational in that original context. It was often the only reliable form of control a child actually had. So what does this pattern actually look like? And how do you tell the healthy version from the harmful one? Let's break it down. Sign 1. Their thinking often feels productive, even when it isn't. This is what makes overthinking so hard to catch in the moment. A single instance of reflection, genuinely trying to understand a feeling or make sense of a situation, can slide almost invisibly into a spiral. Because the brain is actively engaged, it feels like something is being solved. Cognitive psychologists sometimes call this the illusion of mental progress. The mind feels like it's working toward an answer, but really, it's just looping the same territory over and over, mistaking motion for movement. Sign 2. Their brain rewards the thinking itself, not the outcome. When someone runs through a scenario, weighing every angle, constructing arguments for and against, the brain releases small amounts of dopamine, simply from the act of problem solving, even when the problem is entirely imagined. This means the reward isn't for reaching a resolution, it's for the activity of thinking itself. This is exactly why telling someone to just stop thinking about it rarely works. There's a genuine chemical incentive underneath the loop, quietly encouraging it to continue. This is also why overthinking can feel almost pleasant in a strange way, even when the content of the thoughts is stressful. The brain isn't rewarding the stress, it's rewarding the engagement, which means willpower alone was never going to be a reliable way to switch it off. Sign 3. They're often more perceptive than the people around them, and it costs them something real. People who ruminate more tend to score higher on measures of cognitive empathy. the ability to sense how others might be thinking or feeling before it's said out loud. They notice the tone shift in a text message, the pause before someone answers, the tension nobody else in the room seems to register. That same sensitivity is exactly what makes them so exhausted, because perception without resolution just keeps accumulating, with nowhere to put it down. It's a bit like walking into every room already fluent in a language no one else in the room is speaking out loud. Sign 4. They move between two different modes without realizing they've crossed a line. Not all overthinking is the same. There's reflective rumination, turning inward to genuinely process an emotion or understand a situation, which when balanced is linked to real self-awareness and emotional intelligence. And there's brooding rumination, a heavier, more passive pattern of dwelling on a problem without ever moving toward resolution, because both feel like the same kind of mental effort from the inside. The felt experience of turning something over gently versus turning it over anxiously for the 20th time can be almost indistinguishable in the moment, which is exactly why so many people assume all of their thinking is the same kind. Here's where it gets painful, because this pattern often looks identical from the inside, whether it's helping or hurting. People rarely catch themselves early enough. As social anxiety that builds slowly, from overanalyzing every interaction long after it's over, they notice everything, they feel the full weight of every possibility, and yet the more they think, the further clarity seems to drift. It's a strange kind of exhaustion, being tired not from a lack of effort, but from too much of it, aimed at something the mind was never actually going to be able to resolve just by thinking harder. And because the thinking looks like effort from the outside too, it rarely gets recognized as the exhausting labor it actually is. No one offers rest for a problem that was never physical to begin with. It's worth saying clearly that none of this makes somebody unbroken or unusually fragile. A mind this attentive is often the same mind that catches what others miss, that senses a friend is struggling before they say a word, that notices the small inconsistency everyone else walked past. The cost is real, but so is the capability sitting right next to it. So what can someone who thinks this much actually do about it? Principle 1. Accept that not everything can be thought through to resolution. Some things have to be felt, decided, or simply released, not solved with more analysis. The instinct to keep searching for one more angle, one more scenario, one more piece of certainty, often isn't leading toward an answer. It's just another loop wearing a productive disguise. Principle 2. Create distance from the thought instead of merging with it. Therapists who work with people who chronically overthink often focus less on stopping the thoughts and more on changing the relationship to them. Instead of, this situation is dangerous and I need to figure it out, the shift becomes, my brain is generating a concern right now. One version pulls you completely into the loop. The other gives you just enough distance to notice you're in one, which is often the first real exit. It sounds like a small shift in language, but the nervous system responds to it differently, because one framing keeps you inside the emergency and the other lets you observe it from just outside the glass, close enough to still understand it, far enough to stop being swept along by it. Principle 3. Recognize which type of thinking you're actually in. Before following a thought further, it's worth pausing to ask whether this feels like understanding something new, or whether it's the same territory being circled again, a question with genuinely no new information arriving, just the same worry wearing a different sentence. Reflective rumination tends to move somewhere, brooding rumination tends to repeat. Learning to notice which one you're in real time, is often more useful than trying to silence the thinking altogether. So, to recap, overthinking isn't one single problem, and it isn't a personal flaw. It comes from a mind that learned, often early on, to stay alert in a world that once felt unpredictable. It shows up as thinking that feels productive, but isn't, as a brain that rewards the act of thinking itself, as heightened perception that comes with real exhaustion attached, and as two different modes of rumination that often get mistaken for one. The way through isn't forcing the mind to go quiet. It's learning the difference between reflection and looping, creating a little distance from the thought instead of fusing with it, and accepting that some things were never going to be solved by thinking about them one more time, no matter how many more times the mind is willing to try. If you've ever been told to just stop overthinking, as if it were that simple, hear this: your mind isn't broken. It's a highly active system that learned to stay alert, and the goal was never to force it into silence. It's to teach it, gently, that it's finally safe enough to rest. If this resonated, let us know in the comments which sign felt closest to your own experience. And if you know someone who's always a few steps ahead in their own head, share this with them. It might be exactly the understanding they've been needing, the reminder that the very thing exhausting them might also be the thing that makes them who they are. Psychology Sound says thanks for watching, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you next time.